Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The belt bit my hips as I lunged for the door. My shoes slid on something slick. My husband blocked the hallway with open arms. "Wait, pray," he breathed. I kept moving because the floor felt like a cliff. I'm Lena, 34, and I was bleeding fast. Not a scrape, not a scare. A red, warm, unstoppable thing. I grabbed the keys and shoved past his shoulder. The stairwell swallowed us and the world tilted. The car coughed once, then caught. He climbed in slow, muttering verses. I pressed the accelerator and tasted copper. A cramp folded me in half. Breath came shallow and mean. Traffic stood still at the light. I hit the horn and held it. Across the glass he touched his chest. 2 fingers, a vow. The light turned and I shot through. The ER doors flew wide and the air hit cold. A nurse locked eyes and waved me forward. Clipboard up, questions fired like nails. Allergies, meds, consent. My hands shook and I signed anyway. He stepped between the beds and the curtain. "We trust first," he whispered. The nurse's jaw worked tight. She snapped a band around my wrist. Someone called for blood in a crash cart. The needle slid and the room steadied. Beeps stacked into a rhythm I could count. My husband hovered near the IV pole. "Trials refine," he murmured. I watched the bag rise like a dare. Pain level, the resident leaned in, not blinking. 8, maybe 9. She nodded and squeezed my shoulder. "We push again." I swallowed hard because the word again meant risk. The paper came for signature number 2. Transfusion authorization, clear language, ugly stakes. He placed his palm over the page. "Faith covers," he said. My initials went down anyway, small and stubborn. A woman in scrubs checked my pressure. "It's falling," she said. My husband closed his eyes and smiled thin. The nurse looked at me as if we shared a secret. "Stay with me," she said, fierce. The room narrowed to my breath and the monitor. I felt the world go soft at the edges. A tug at my arm, a burn at my vein. The resident's voice stayed steady. "You are not going anywhere yet." He tried to kiss my forehead and I flinched. Contact felt like permission I could not give. "Courage," he whispered. The nurse angled her body between us. "Back up," she warned without raising volume. The chaplain appeared with a laminated card. He hovered by the wall and watched. My husband nodded at him like an ally. I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted 4 cracks. A 5th one waited to split. "Bleeding source unclear," the resident leaned to the nurse. A word passed fast between them. "Ultrasound." The machine rolled in on small wheels. Gel hit cold and sharp like a slap. The screen showed motion I could not name. The nurse squeezed my hand once. I felt a second bag clip into place. My husband whispered the old line again, calm and flat. Something inside me rebelled. The resident met my eyes and didn't blink. "We need to act now." She spoke like a door closing. My throat tightened and then cleared. "Do it," I said, because the clock had teeth. A pen tapped the tray, impatient and metallic. The consent form waited for my mark. He inhaled to object and I raised my palm. Not a plea, a warning. His mouth closed and stayed closed. They rolled me toward the double doors. My husband walked beside the gurney, slow and certain. He quoted another verse and reached for my wrist. The nurse's shoulder blocked him like a wall. He stepped back with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Any pregnancy chance?" The question landed hard. "No," the answer came faster than my fear. The tech scribbled and nodded. My chest found a rhythm that did not break, for now. The anesthesiologist appeared and checked the line. His voice carried facts and timelines. I clung to the math because it didn't lie. He asked for my name to confirm. "Lena," I said, strong enough to own it. The doors swung and the lights changed. A beeping cart crossed our path like a warning. The resident's mask crinkled when she spoke. "We've got you." I believed her because belief had weight I could lift. Behind us his voice lifted, then faded. It chased me through the seam of the doors. "We are never given more than we can bear." The line floated like a net. I wanted scissors. The mask touched my face and the world dimmed. I stared at the red numbers ticking up. Each second felt purchased at full price. My last thought was simple and sharp. This time I decide. I woke to a cuff squeezing my arm hard. A monitor ticked like a patient metronome. A nurse lifted the sheet and checked the dressing. Stable for now. Her eyes searched mine for drift. He stood near the footboard with his hands clasped. A thin smile grew when he saw me alert. "Release today if you walk," the nurse added. His shoulders relaxed as if a prize waited. I swung my legs down and the room tilted. The nurse steadied my elbow and nodded once. "Slow steps." She pointed to the hallway door. My stomach tightened at the thought of thresholds. Paperwork landed on the tray. With a firm tap, "Authorization for meds at home," the nurse said. He moved closer and slid a form aside. "We can skip that," he murmured without shame. I pulled the paper back and read the risk line. Not theoretical, not optional. My signature went down in sharp strokes. He stared as if I had broken a rule. Billing rolled in on a squeaky cart. The clerk kept her voice level and exact. "Deposit today." I reached for my wallet with a dry mouth. His card hovered, then disappeared into his pocket. "Decline on file." The clerk watched our faces. He squeezed my shoulder and quoted nothing this time. I paid with my last workable piece of plastic. The number on the screen felt like a dare. My phone lit with alerts as they wheeled me out. A banking app showed transfers tagged with vows. Recurring, large, backdated. My pulse jumped faster than the monitor had. He pretended to check a scuff on his shoe. Ready to discharge, the nurse brought a small bag and instructions. She spoke directly to me and paused after each step. I repeated the schedule aloud to fix it. He looked past us toward the chapel board. We reached the curb and the air felt thin. He opened the passenger door with a courtly flourish. My ribs protested as I lowered into the seat. A fresh alert flashed across the glass. Unknown number asked if the promise still stood. "Who wants you at noon?" My voice scraped as I held the phone up. He blinked twice and produced an easy smile. "Volunteer coordination." His thumb drifted toward the screen like a hawk. I angled the phone away and pressed call. It rang once and clicked without greeting. A woman breathed and then hung up fast. My grip tightened on the case until it creaked. Silence filled the car like heavy fog. He turned the key and merged with jerky precision. I memorized the last 4 digits on the missed call. They overlaid my vision like a watermark. Traffic thickened near the pharmacy entrance. I unbuckled and stood before the engine stopped. He reached for my forearm with gentle fingers. I shifted out of range and felt my core harden. The pharmacist asked for identification and a plan. I read the copay and tried not to flinch. He stepped forward and placed a tract on the counter. The cashier looked at me rather than him. I authorized the charge and pocketed the receipt. Behind us, someone laughed at a video and the sound cracked. He touched the small of my back and breathed shallow. My spine straightened on instinct like a drawstring. We reached the sidewalk and the noon sun beat down. I scanned for a bench and found a low wall. He hovered close and spoke softly near my ear. "You were brave." The words felt preloaded. Another alert blinked and my throat tightened. A calendar invite slotted into tonight at 7. Title read counseling and renewal with a cross emoji. Location redacted. The host field showed only initials. "I have recovery orders." I held the printout like a shield. No outings, no exertion. He lifted his palms in a polite surrender. "I committed to a meeting long before today." "This meeting happens without you." I kept my voice even. He swallowed and glanced toward the street as if expecting backup. A rideshare slowed and then rolled past without stopping. His jaw worked and then settled. We walked to the apartment and my legs trembled. Inside, the air held a metallic chill that raised goose flesh. Mail lay under the door in a messy wedge. I towed it open and froze at the top sheet. An advance directive sat there with my name bold. The signature looked like my hand, but wrong. The witness lines bore familiar surnames from a Pew list. My chest tightened around something sharp and new. He drifted to the kitchen and organized nothing. I carried the paper to the table and traced the strokes. The box for transfusions showed a firm refusal already marked. Heat pooled in my face like a siren. "Where did you get this?" My voice cut through the room clean. He lowered a drawer slowly and did not answer. The silence pooled and tugged at my ankles. I waited because the next move mattered. "Our community prepares essential documents," he offered at last. Words pitched sweet like a lullaby held too long. I slid the directive across the table with 2 fingers. "My mark goes nowhere without me." His smile turned thin and practiced and calm. He gestured toward the couch like a patient usher. "Sit, breathe, recover." I stayed standing because gravity felt honest. Another buzz hit the counter and we both looked. The same initials sent a new message with urgency. "Confirm attendance or risks will follow." My teeth met hard enough to spark. I snapped a photo of the directive front and back. I saved it to a folder with a name I could remember. Insurance would need proof of tampering if this grew teeth. A plan formed as if my bones wrote it. "Tonight you stay here," I said without a tremor. He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe and studied my face. "You cannot control every storm." He kept it gentle and most clinical. "I can lock one door." I pocketed the keys and held his gaze. He lowered his eyes first and breathed through his nose. The room went quiet except for a fridge hum. The directive lay between us like a live wire. I called the hospital and asked for a patient advocate. The line connected fast and the woman spoke crisp. I read the directive number and my discharge time. She paused and called it highly irregular. Email it now. Her tone shifted from polite to urgent. I scanned with trembling hands and sent the file through. She promised a review and follow-up today. I believed her because she used verbs with weight. He stepped outside and the deadbolt turned softly. Through the peephole I watched him dial with quick fingers. His mouth formed a name I could not hear. He walked toward the elevator with purpose and speed. The apartment settled and I moved to the bedroom. A faint ache pulsed along the incision like a drum. I lay back with shoes still on and stared up. My mind listed tasks as if triage never ended. New message, same initials, new tone, cancel and we escalate to leadership. I stared at those words until they blurred, then I unlocked my phone and hit record. Put this on the calendar, I told my future self. Document everything. My voice steadied as I spoke into the mic. He intends to attend tonight despite medical restrictions. Footsteps returned outside and keys jangled confidently. I stood and braced because the day had teeth. The lock turned and the door opened slow. He stepped in with a canvas satchel and a careful smile. Groceries, he lifted it like a peace offering. I watched the bag rather than his eyes. The zipper gaped and showed an envelope corner. Something official waited in there like a trap. Set it down, my hand hovered near the phone. He placed the satchel on the chair and backed away 2 steps. I pulled the envelope free and felt the ridge of a seal. Inside lay a pledge contract with our names tied, amounts listed in escalating blocks across weeks. A line near the bottom assigned responsibility to household. My stomach dropped, yet I held the paper steady. I lifted the phone and framed the contract clean. Photos clicked in rapid bursts like tiny hammers. He shifted his weight and rolled his wrists as if limbering up. We both understood the next round had started. Meeting at 7 becomes a report at 7. I opened the Notes app and typed as I spoke. Names, places, screenshots, timeline. He closed his eyes and breathed like a swimmer before a dive. I slid the contract back into the envelope and sealed it flat. The satchel stayed on the chair like a planted witness. The directive copy glowed on my screen and steadied me. I locked the door behind him when he left again. The apartment hummed with a taut quiet I could map. I cleaned the sink slowly because motion calmed my hands. Then I sat and planned the evening with ruthless clarity. He thought I would falter before dark. He miscalculated. I dialed the unknown number before doubt gathered. 1 ring. A woman answered with a whisper that carried urgency. Meet me before 7. The line clicked dead and my pulse spiked. I texted back a place 2 blocks away. Short walk, low risk. She replied with a simple yes, no name, no emoji. Clean coordination felt like a blade. I stuffed the directive copy and the pledge photos into my pocket. Keys went next, phone last. I checked the hallway for footsteps. Empty, yet the air felt watched. At the corner pharmacy I bought a burner card. Cash only, no questions. The clerk tore the receipt and looked away fast. I logged the numbers because paper vanishes. She arrived in a hoodie and kept her chin down. No pastor, she said without pleasantries. She slid her phone across the bench. Messages filled the screen like proof ready to bite. I read dates and slots in coded language. Words like renewal and cleansing and covenant appeared in threads. Attachments showed room reservations with a cross in the title. My mouth went dry at the overlap. Who are you to him? I asked it steady to keep control. Her shoulders tightened then settled. Someone drafted into a promise I didn't write. Her eyes flicked to my pocket. I showed her the directive photo and the contract. She cursed under her breath and tapped her screen. A contact card opened with initials that matched my calendar. She pressed share like a trigger. A final text popped up from that contact. Confirm attendance or leadership will act. She stared until the words blurred for both of us. They push when they smell fear, she murmured. Come with me at 7. I kept my voice level and practical. We deliver records, not pleas. She nodded once and pocketed her phone. We stood because sitting felt like surrender. Back home I forwarded everything to the patient advocate. Subject line used the phrase possible fraud. I attached screenshots and timestamps in the contract stills. My finger hovered before send, then pressed hard. Knock rattled the door with polite rhythm. I checked the peephole and saw a deacon from Sunday. He held a manila envelope under his arm like a sermon. I opened the chain and let my face stay blank. Materials for tonight. He pushed the envelope through the gap. I didn't take it. Leave it on the floor. He obeyed and stepped back 2 paces. The hall smelled like rain and nerves. I opened the packet using my nail as a knife. Inside sat pledge schedules and attendance expectations with boxes for initials. A final page labeled discipline listed remedies. One line mentioned restricted care choices. My stomach turned, but my hands stayed steady. I photographed every page top to bottom. The deacon shifted and cleared his throat like a metronome. I closed the door without a word and slid the bolt. 5 minutes later, a new email arrived from the advocate. She requested a quick call with recordings if available. I dialed and placed the speaker on the table. Her tone carried steel and procedure. I recited the timeline without filler. Hospital, discharge, contract, messages, tonight's plan. She asked me to avoid confrontation alone. I told her another witness would attend with me, then saved her number under guardian. I dressed in loose clothes that didn't tug the stitches. Nothing flashy, nothing easy to grab. I slipped the directive copy into my wallet, steps light, phone charged, exit strategy planned. The rideshare driver watched us in the mirror. I gave the location 2 blocks short of the building. We got out at a laundromat and circled on foot, less obvious, fewer angles to trap. Outside the narrow stairwell, I felt a downdraft of voices. He laughed at something and the sound tightened my jaw. Mara glanced at me and nodded once. We climbed slow to control the moment. A volunteer blocked the doorway with an usher smile. Private gathering. He extended an open palm. I held up the discipline sheet with the hospital line visible. His smile fell like a curtain cut loose. We entered a room filled with folding chairs and old carpets. A podium stood near a donation bag on a chair. Faces turned as if on a shared hinge. He looked surprised for the first time all day. "We have documents." I kept my voice even and loud enough to carry. I placed the directive copy on the podium and then the contract. Murmurs rose in choppy waves. Mara opened her photo roll like a case file. He tried to guide the moment with an uplifted hand. I stepped sideways and blocked his reach with my shoulder. "We won't accept coercive care limits." My words landed and split the room clean. A leader with a pin approached with careful steps. "Let's speak in the office." He gestured to a back hallway with fake calm. I shook my head and tapped record on my phone. "We speak here." Mara connected her phone to a small speaker from her pocket. Screenshots flashed. Audio clips played. Calendar invites stacked like bricks. The crowd shifted from confident to wary in one breath. He moved toward the donation bag with casual intent. My eyes followed the movement like a magnet. He touched the zipper and then reconsidered. A man near the wall pulled out his own phone. I held the envelope from the deacon high so all could see. Household liability, medical choices, financial extraction. Each phrase hit like a gavel. The leader's pin looked suddenly heavy on his lapel. "Return what belongs to the members." My finger pointed to the bag like a compass. The room watched his hands hover. Another volunteer stepped forward and placed palms on the chair. He whispered my name as if kindness could reset the board. I kept my eyes on the paper stack, not his face. "We are not your ledger," I said with zero tremor. Mara's shoulders squared beside me. The leader asked for a cooling prayer and reached for a Bible. Half the room closed their eyes on reflex. I didn't. I stared at the exit and counted heads. 2 men near the door, 1 by the window. A phone flashed with a police badge screensaver near the aisle. Someone had called seconds earlier. Relief pricked, but I held my posture. Nothing ends until paperwork moves. He took a quick step toward the back hall, then stopped. A congregant blocked without speaking, and the air tightened. I breathed in through my nose and kept my feet planted. The bag still sat like a dare. An older woman rose and lifted the donation bag carefully. She set it on the podium with both hands. "Transparency," she said with a small nod. Bills peeked out like a confession in progress. I pressed stop on the recorder and saved the file twice. Then I started a new one without missing a beat. He watched the red light with growing panic. His jaw clenched and released. "What now?" the leader asked, voice low and controlled. "Receipts, names, refund schedule, written." I tapped the podium with my knuckle. "Also, written retraction of any limits on my treatment." He looked to the pin, then to the crowd, then to him. Their silent exchange landed like a deal gone sour. A printer started somewhere behind the wall. My breath loosened, but I stayed hard. The police officer entered with calm strides and a notepad. He took in the bag and the stack of forms. "We'll sort this." His pen hovered over the first line as he looked at me for a name. I gave it and pointed to the directive copy. "Forgery and coercion around medical care." He nodded and photographed the sheet. Mara handed over her messages with steady hands and a fixed jaw. 2 ushers tried to edge toward the exit. The officer's partner appeared in the doorway and shook her head. The room held still like a trapped animal. I could hear my pulse in my ears. The printer spat out a single page and then another. The leader returned with a document labeled Acknowledgement and Relief. He placed it on the podium without flourish and slid a pen forward. I read every line out loud for the record. Reversal of unauthorized directives, freeze on all household pledges, independent review by outside counsel. The officer watched my mouth like a court reporter. He shifted from conviction to calculation in one breath. "We can handle hardship," he murmured for the room. It sounded like a line said to mirrors. My laugh came short and mean. I signed under the final clause and checked the time. 6:58. 2 minutes until their session would have started. Instead, we had minutes that belonged to us. The officer collected the donation bag and sealed it in evidence. Camera flash, signature, chain of custody line filled with neat letters. The room exhaled, but I did not. We walked out into the hallway with papers and copies. My legs trembled and then steadied. Mara met my eye and gave a sharp nod. We were not done until institutions moved. On the street, the evening stretched like a new field. I pulled out my phone and opened an email draft to Guardian. Subject line read immediate outcomes attached. I attached files until the bar went full. A siren wailed 3 blocks away and then faded. I tasted adrenaline and something stubborn like relief. Mara squeezed my shoulder once and then turned uphill. We split at the crosswalk without looking back. My phone buzzed before I reached the corner. "Precinct, we need your statement now." I turned back toward the main street and raised my hand for a car. Tires hissed and I climbed in with my pulse high. At the station, I signed the intake sheet and pressed record. The officer arranged evidence on the desk with patient hands. Financial coercion, possible forgery, possible theft. He listed charges like stepping stones. I slid my phone across with the timeline open. He wanted originals, not screenshots. I forwarded full files from the hospital portal. "We'll request the hard copies," he said with a small nod. He asked about tonight's meeting again. "I recorded everything," I said, and unlocked the folder. The door opened and he walked in with a consultant from the church. Both paused when they saw me. He smoothed his tie and tried a calm smile. The officer gestured to separate chairs and shut the door hard. "Do you feel safe returning home?" The question landed with weight, not with shared keys. My hands stayed flat on the table. The officer slid over a brochure with a phone number circled. "Protective order, courthouse today." Mara texted while I waited for copies. "Courthouse line moving, I'm here." I replied with one word, "coming." The officer printed my statement and pointed to the last line. I signed with a steady stroke that surprised me. We met under the security arch and exchanged a tight look. The clerk took our forms and asked for dates and locations. "Now," I answered when asked about danger. She stamped the top page and told us to sit within earshot. He arrived with a different leader and a neat envelope. They tried to approach and the bailiff lifted a palm. Separate sides. The envelope went back into a pocket. He looked over my head as if I wasn't there. Our case number flashed and we stood together. The judge read quickly and asked one question. "Any contact today?" I lifted my phone and showed 3 missed calls. The order printed while the clock on the wall clicked. Outside, my phone rang with a hospital number. Compliance confirmed the directive was invalid. The advocate's voice carried momentum. "We're filing an internal incident report today." Air returned to my lungs in a clean rush. Also, billing flagged unusual third-party notes. Her tone sharpened like a tool. "Send that contract you photographed." I shared the folder and waded through the upload bar. "Received," she said, then promised a formal letter of correction by end of day. Bank security finally answered after 2 holds. I explained the pattern and read the merchant code. "Recurring transfers initiated from a pledge portal," the agent said. "We can place a freeze with 2-factor. I changed my passcode and set alerts to instant. A new push notification arrived mid-call. "Attempted debit, blocked." Another one flashed, "blocked." I pictured him staring at a screen somewhere, jaw tight. The agent asked if I wanted a new account number. "Yes," I answered and wrote the case ID on my hand. The apartment door camera pinged as we left the elevator. He filled the frame and tried a key that no longer worked. He held up an envelope to the lens with a practiced grimace. He slid it under the door and walked away slow. I picked it up with 2 fingers and let the card fall out. Scripture on one side, apology on the other. Inside the fold sat a thin tile with adhesive backing. I set it next to the sink and covered it with a mixing bowl. "Tracker," Mara whispered, eyes sharp. I opened my car app and checked the GPS history. A dot lingered near the church office after midnight. Another dot hovered near the hospital discharge desk. My stomach tightened hard and clean. I booked a ride to a mechanic that removed electronics. The tech pried under the bumper and pulled out a small device. He dropped it into a metal tin and closed the lid with a click. Whoever placed it will see nothing now. At noon, Mara texted a clinic address with a short line. I need a test. We met in a quiet lobby with a ticking clock. Her hands shook when the nurse called her name. I followed as far as the door allowed. She came out with damp eyelashes and a folded pamphlet. Positive. The word hung between us like a challenge. She looked at my face for an answer I didn't have yet. My hand found hers because action mattered more than wisdom. We make a plan that isn't borrowed. My voice found a steady lane. We booked a follow-up before fear could reorganize us. Dates and times filled a simple list. Every line felt like a thin plank over water. A church email arrived while we waited for the bus. Cease defamatory statements or face legal action. The subject tried to intimidate with weight. I forwarded it to the officer and the hospital advocate. Then I added the state charity bureau. Another message appeared within minutes. Return pledged funds or expect collections. I sent that to the bank fraud team with screenshots. The reply came back faster than I expected. Collection attempts will be blocked pending investigation. We left the clinic and walked into moving traffic noise. I felt lighter and more dangerous at the same time. Mara stopped and looked at me sideways. You could leave this, she whispered. The thought tasted like ash and then disappeared. My phone vibrated with a number from a local reporter. We received a tip with documents attached. Her voice was curious but careful. Will you go on record? I paused long enough to hear my heartbeat. Yes, with the order and the hospital letter. We met in a coffee shop with the order on the table. I showed her the timeline and the police incident number. She took notes and reread the directive twice. This part is key, she said, tapping the refusal box. A text from the advocate landed mid-interview. Letter issued, directive rescinded, copies sent to you in the precinct. I opened the PDF and felt something inside uncoil. I pushed the phone across the table and watched the reporter's eyes widen. Mara leaned in and showed the positive test envelope. This belongs in context, she said without wobble. The reporter nodded and flagged her editor in a quick whisper. She asked for a name for the initials in my calendar. I gave it without theatrical pause. We stepped back into the street with a clearer path. The order covered residence and workplace and phone contact. The bank accounts were sealed like jars. The tracker sat under a bowl waiting for a badge. The elevator doors opened on our floor and stopped too soon. Someone blocked them with a shoe and then removed it. The hall stretched empty, yet I felt watched. I reached for my keys and kept my chin up. A final message hit my lock screen as I turned the deadbolt. Hearing set for Friday, bring all documents. The case number sat under the text like a drumbeat. I placed all files in a single folder and slid it into my bag. Night fell while I arranged pages on the table. The camera dot on the tracker blinked under the bowl like a trapped insect. I breathed through my nose until the urge to smash it passed. Then I dialed the officer and reported its make and model. Hold it for collection, he said, and confirmed a pickup window. I wrote the time on a sticky note and placed it near the door. The apartment exhaled like a patient after a long scan. I lay down fully dressed with the bag within reach. A new vibration crawled across the nightstand and stopped. No message, just a location ping trying to wake the dead device. I watched the bowl until sleep finally took me like a tide that meant business. I woke to boots in the hallway and a firm knock, property retrieval. The detective held up a numbered bag. I slid the bowl aside and handed over the device. He logged it and asked if anyone returned overnight. Only pings. I showed the lock screen with timestamps stacked. He photographed the screen and nodded once. We'll trace the account behind. This thing, he left with the tin while I locked the door twice. My inbox chimed with a hospital email marked urgent. Compliance attached a formal memo with 3 signatures. The forged form was null and flagged for audit. A liaison offered to join Friday's hearing by phone. I forwarded the memo to the precinct and the reporter. Then I sent it to the state board with a short note. Evidence of scheme tied to fundraising, I wrote. My pointer hovered over send, then pressed without mercy. Mara texted from her appointment with a short update. HCG rising, follow-up scheduled. She asked if he had tried contact. I sent a screenshot of blocked calls and the restraining papers. A photo arrived from an unknown number during lunch, our front stoop with a bouquet and a ribbon. The caption read reconciliation meeting at noon, attendance expected. I replied with a single image of the court stamp. 2 more texts landed minutes later. One threatened discipline from leadership committees. The other hinted at civil claims for defamation. I flagged both and forwarded them to the fraud case agent. My hands shook, but my voice stayed even when I spoke. The reporter called with a careful tone. We have corroboration from a former treasurer. She wanted my voice on tape for broadcast. I agreed under my own name and read the memo word for word. An alert flashed on my banking app mid-interview. Attempted debit through a renamed portal, blocked. Then another try with a split amount, also blocked. The agent texted back one line, "Good firewall." At 3, the building intercom crackled with a pleasant voice. "Delivery for you." Camera showed him in a cap with the ribboned flowers. He covered the lens with his palm and held the buzzer. I muted the system and dialed the non-emergency line. A patrol car rolled up within minutes and parked out front. He stepped back with arms lifted like theater. The officer spoke to him through the window of the squad car. He pointed at the camera and at my door. She paged the case number and waited for dispatch. He retreated to the sidewalk and slapped the cap against his thigh. The officer stayed until he drifted around the corner. Then she rang my bell and spoke through the speaker. "Call us again if he returns." Mara arrived with a folder and a set jaw. We spread timelines on the table and cross-checked names. New overlaps appeared in the calendars like trapdoors. She pointed to a childcare fundraiser listed on 3 dates. Matching nights, I breathed as the pattern clicked. We pulled receipts from our emails and circled the same code. The same initials tied our charges to those events. My stomach tightened as I realized the reach. I drafted a short affidavit about the overlapping nights, no opinions, only stamps, totals, and organizer names. Mara added her screenshots with a neat index. We saved the file to 3 locations and printed a single copy. The phone lit again with a private number. "Counsel here for the organization." The voice tried to flatten the day. He requested a meeting to resolve misunderstandings before the hearing. I recorded the call and asked for the request in writing. An email arrived seconds later with polished language. It offered mediation at their office and promised a pastoral presence. I replied with one sentence: "Meet at the courthouse with counsel of record. No side rooms, no improvisations." At 5, a rock struck the metal gate below the window, then another. I peered through the peephole and saw 2 young volunteers. They placed flyers under doors and hustled out. I retrieved one with tongs and read the headline: "False accusations harm the flock." I photographed the flyer and sent it to the detective with the case ID. He responded with a timestamp and a plan to pull camera footage. I closed the hallway door and slid the chain. My pulse kept time against my ribs. Mara reheated soup and pushed a bowl toward me. I ate because fuel was policy. We spoke in short sentences and mapped tomorrow. Her clinic visit at 9. My meeting with the reporter at 10. The courthouse at 1 with the liaison on speaker. The intercom buzzed again and then went dead. Footsteps in the stairwell followed and then a pause. Keys scraped at metal and then fell silent. I raised the phone and started another recording. A voice rose outside, warm and persuasive. "Let's pray before lawyers twist hearts." A second voice joined with a practiced cadence. They read from a paper and asked the building to join. Doors opened down the hall and then closed. I opened my door a crack and held up the restraining papers. "You're within the protected perimeter," I said with no wobble. One of them flinched and looked at the other. They retreated 2 steps and kept reading from the paper. The patrol car returned with the same officer from noon. She stepped into the hallway and took the sheet from my hand. She faced the pair and spoke low and exact. They left without ceremony, and the hallway emptied with a sigh. Mail. Nuts later, my phone lit with an entry from the county docket. Friday's hearing confirmed with a named judge. A second line noted a related filing for theft by deception. I hovered over that second line and felt the ground rise. The detective called back with a clipped update. The tracker subscription belonged to a church account. The billing contact matched the initials in my calendar. A warrant request would be filed tonight. I stood very still and let the information settle. Then I pulled my bag from under the chair and packed the day's files. I added the court stamp, the hospital memo, and the bank letters. Everything labeled, everything ready to travel. The last text of the night arrived from an unsaved number. "When the testing is done, we will take care of our own." No names, no promise, just pressure shaped like charity. I blocked the number and wrote the words into my notes. I lay on the couch with my shoes still on and the bag within reach. The intercom stayed silent for the first time all day. My hands finally stopped shaking. I stared at the ceiling and planned my first sentence for the judge. Then the buzzer screamed again. The buzzer howled and I jolted upright. I grabbed the folder in the phone. "Who is there?" Silence stretched, then a low voice asked for me by full name. "Service of process." Through the camera, a courier lifted a clipboard. I cracked the door with the chain still set. He slid papers through the gap and backed down the stairs without a glance. A summons for civil claims sat on top. defamation and interference printed in bold lines. Hearing date matched Friday like a trap. I photographed every page before anything else moved. I forwarded the packet to the detective and the reporter. Then I sent copies to the liaison at the hospital. My pulse steadied as tasks stacked. Momentum dulled the dread for a moment. Before sunrise, the precinct called with quick breaths. Warrant granted for the tracking subscription account. Pickup scheduled for office equipment listed on the invoice. We will need you later, the voice added, clipped. I washed my face and dressed for impact. Loose shirt, flat shoes, no jewelry. I packed the original documents and the updated timeline. I stood at the door until my hands stopped vibrating. We met the reporter near the courthouse steps. She checked her recorder and kept her voice measured. We will air this after filings are public. I nodded because that guardrail mattered more than catharsis. Inside, the security line shuffled toward bins and belts. My folder slid through and emerged intact. Mara arrived carrying a sealed envelope from the clinic. We didn't hug. We stood shoulder to shoulder like a brace. The morning calendar moved fast. Small cases, stipulations, extensions. Then our number flashed with both captions glowing: order enforcement, theft by deception. The room cooled as if we had opened a door. We sat at the front with our papers open. He entered with counsel and chose a seat 2 rows back. He didn't look at me. He fixed on the judge's nameplate and squared his shoulders like armor. Counsel argued first with an even cadence. He called our claims exaggerated and framed the forms as misunderstandings. He leaned on words like community and tradition. The judge held up a palm and asked about signatures. I slid the hospital memo across the rail. The clerk carried it up with a neutral face. The judge read the rescission line and paused on the audit note. He lifted his eyebrows half an inch, then looked at counsel. Explain the subscription for the tracker, the judge asked flatly. Counsel faltered and requested time to verify details. The detective stepped forward from the gallery with a small nod. Chain of custody arrived like a doorstop. The judge signed an order for temporary return of collected funds. He barred any contact outside counsel channels. He scheduled a status conference on the fraud case. Then he turned to me and asked one thing. Do you require additional protection today? I looked back toward him and the leaders behind him. My spine answered before my mouth caught up. Yes, for my home and my workplace. Order granted, printed immediately. The clerk handed me fresh papers warm from the machine. I held them as if they could stop bullets. They felt thin, yet the room shifted. We stepped into the hallway and Mara exhaled hard. Clinic next, she whispered, and I nodded once. I squeezed her hand and let go fast. We walked because standing still made us targets. In the stairwell, a familiar pin glinted 1 flight down. The leader from the meeting stood with folded arms. We can forgive if you retract, he murmured without blinking. My laugh came out like gravel. Put forgiveness in writing with the repayments, I answered. His nostrils flared and then settled. He stepped aside with a courtly gesture. You will regret scorning covering grace. We kept moving without responding. Outside, a patrol car idled at the curb. The detective leaned on the door with a file in hand. Equipment seized from the office, he said, and listed timestamps. Images showed our names on spreadsheets with totals lined up. Mara closed her eyes for one breath, then she squared up and opened her envelope. The clinic letter named her condition and the next steps. It identified the father with clinical neutrality. The detective scanned it and nodded once. He handed us each a card and wrote a direct number on the back. Call when the collections office contacts you, he instructed. Call if anyone appears near your door. He glanced at the courthouse doors as if expecting movement. We left the curb and walked into mid-afternoon heat. My body reminded me I was still healing. I slowed and kept my chest high. Mara matched my pace and didn't ask for details. At the clinic, the nurse welcomed us by name. She reviewed options with short, clear sentences that respected time and breath. She scheduled the next visit and handed over a printout. Every line made space for decisions without pressure. A text from an unknown number arrived as we crossed the lobby. 3 words burned the screen. Judas has friends. I blocked the number and forwarded the screenshot with the case tag. Anger flared hot and clean, then cooled into focus. We stepped outside and my phone rang again. The reporter's producer wanted a statement from Leadership for Balance. They declined on-record comment, she reported. They sent a vague note about prayer and unity. Good, that dodge would air alongside documents. That contrast mattered more than any sound bite from me. Facts could ask bigger questions than my voice ever could. Back home, an envelope sat in the mailbox with a church return address. I opened it in the lobby with my keys ready. Inside lay a typed apology unsigned by anyone. The last line requested reconciliation counseling. I scanned the page and filed it under performative attempts. Then I placed it in a plastic sleeve with the flyer from last night. Paper keeps score when people try to erase tracks. Mine did its job today. The detective called at dusk with another update. The tracking account paid from congregational funds over several months. The username matched the initials from my calendar. He used the word pattern instead of coincidence and let it hang. He asked if I wanted charges expanded to include stalking. I chose yes after a beat that felt like a cliff. My voice did not shake. I wrote the new case number on the whiteboard near the door. I cooked rice while Mara texted from home with a short check-in. She confirmed her next appointment and sent a photo of vitamins. I sent a heart and a thumbs up without extra words. We were building lanes that held. The reporter aired the segment at 10 with our names masked by a soft blur. The radio version ran with my voice clipped and steady. The anchor promised a follow-up on the audit. I stood in the kitchen and listened like a stranger. Minutes later, my phone lit with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Some thanked me for speaking up. Some accused me of tearing down comfort. I screenshotted threats and ignored the rest. Praise felt like lullabies, and I needed alarms. Near 11, the intercom buzzed one last time. The camera showed a single grocery bag and no person. I waited a full minute before moving. Inside sat baby formula and a card with a verse. I left both on the stoop and closed the door. My chest hurt, but not from fear. I understood the tactic now. Charity that binds, help with strings, love with invoices. I placed tomorrow's clothes on the chair and set 4 alarms. Friday meant depositions and more paper. Friday meant a judge I now trusted to read closely. Friday meant I told a room exactly how I survived. I lay down and counted the steps from bed to door, from door to elevator, from elevator to street, not for escape but for rhythm. Then I whispered the only line I wanted to keep. We are given choices, not weights to carry alone. I will carry mine and put down his, and when the morning finds me, I intend to answer loud.